Friends, our story begins late at night, in the middle of an obscure forest where some pretty scary things have started to happen. Suddenly, a violent explosion is emitted, after which a monster immediately flew into battle, destroying everything in its path and wanted to do the same to the small-bodied boy. He deftly jumped on his back and deftly handled him, despite his appearance, which turned out to be deceptive. At the moment of the fight, he paused only a few seconds to think and fix his hair, after which he immediately charged the monster with arrows from his bow. It immediately fell to the ground and was defeated. After the victory, there was a blue glow in the sky that came straight from the sun. It was they who helped us to spectacularly present this hero, which became Archer Ian. It was the little guy who was the archer. At this time, he was receiving his reward for being able to destroy the ogre. He decided that when he got about 100,000 gold, then he would take a break for himself. Suddenly, his eyes narrowed sharply and became wary, and near the archer, a smokescreen suddenly formed, behind which he saw absolutely nothing but approaching red eyes and a dark silhouette that was several times his size. It turned out to be a monster, at once with two heads, who laughed, feeling his advantage, for his mace alone was several times the size of the little archer. Archer was frightened out of his wits, and at that moment, a sharp blow from the mace flew at him, making him jump several meters. He is glad that he was able to save himself, because it is all thanks to the fact that he has the haste skill. But, unfortunately, the system tells him that he has only 1 minute left to use this skill, after which he will have a hard time. This makes Archer a little worried and realizes that he has to deal with a huge monster in 1 minute. And all this happens at a time when the monster is attacking him in parallel. As he revisits the system once more, the monster begins to fly as hard as he can into battle, at which point he casually discovers that he has only one trap left in reserve, and realizes that he will not get a second chance again. He was angry and starts screaming and calling for the monsters here. The most important task for him is to get the timing right, because if he makes a mistake, even for 1 second, he's finished. At this point, the ogre was as close as possible, and the archer was at maximum concentration and jumped sharply as soon as he approached him at the right distance. At that moment, he had time to set his traps, which, fortunately, the monster stepped into. It will slow him down and immediately stun him for a few seconds, after which the target becomes much more vulnerable. At this moment, is glad to be caught in his trap, and without wasting a minute, loads his bow and begins to shoot, pre-activating his other skills in order to increase his strength, accuracy, and focus on the enemy. The final shot, and that's it. The bullet now flies along the specified trajectory. The only thing the archer is concentrating on now is whether it will hit its addressee. Fortunately, it flew exactly on target and destroyed the monster completely, from which he fell as a layer on the ground in a dense forest, from which this story began. And then the system came into play again, informing him that it had gained more experience for defeating the twin-headed ogre. Having finished with his opponents, Archer Ian went up close to him to see what had fallen out of him and what items he could pick up for himself. He was very surprised, for he had been rewarded with boots and shoulder pads that had previously belonged to the ogre. It was not surprising because they were very rare, and to get them was like winning the lottery. If you sold them, you could earn at least 5 million won. He was beyond happy, as if he had won a month's worth of happiness at once. Isn't that all? Wait a minute. What's that over there? It turned out that he was also rewarded with Mayulin's crystal, which glittered all around him. He couldn't believe it. That's where Kailan comes in, which is the greatest VR game that was released 6 months ago and had an audience of over 10 million players. It was so popular that it dominates the entire gaming industry. When our hero purchased a capsule for 10 million won to play the game, using all of his and his parents' savings for his studies, everyone told him he was crazy, and all this despite the fact that he started playing 2 months after the release of the game, and in 4 months was able to pump an impressive archer, which today defeated ogres. Monster hunting began to bring him about 200,000 won every hour, and he himself had already made millions from this game. The only problem is that very soon will be announced a new update, which will add at once 3 new classes and a new region. All the players were very happy to hear this news. However, in the city, some players immediately began to worry, as they would have to delete their current character in order to start the game in the new world, even though they had already made it this far. Archer suggested just going into the woods afterwards and picking up new items when they add a new region to be able to pay tuition, if you're lucky. That was their plan for the near future. Myolin's crystal and was a very valuable item that could help them discover a hidden class and solve their questions. Grasping his head, Archer realizes that the only problem is that it can only be used by characters who are below level 10. And he realizes that he needs to completely purge his character if he wants to use the crystal. But the thought of doing it after he's already made a lot of money, thanks to his character, kept him busy. He continued to sit on the ground, pondering what he should do, while a bright flash appeared over his head and illuminated his body. Suddenly, his friend starts shouting sharply, asking if he's really going to remove his hero, who was already level 93. That would be a very dumb loss. He picked up his phone and saw that his character was at the top, among all the players in Korea, and does he really want to lose it all right now? Archer wonders if he doesn't know it himself, but he also realizes that this is a unique chance to unlock the first hidden character class, and he can't just take his crystal and throw it away. Here his friend stops him a bit, and asks him to at least understand a little bit about what will be in the hidden classes. And they have a dialogue, because the game already has a sniper from the hidden class, with which the archer used to go hunting. They begin to argue whether the sniper is really much better for the archer, to which he cannot give a definite answer, but only praises their attack, but specifies that the rate of fire is lame, and will be difficult for them, and fight a bunch of mobs for them to be much harder. Here they agree that even if it's a hidden character class, that doesn't mean it's going to be much better. That's why he starts yelling at the archer, asking why does he want to lose everything and start from scratch. He answers that he can easily earn 1 million just by hunting the characters, and asks why he still plays the game. He was perplexed, of course, and replied, because it's fun. Well, since it's fun, that's the answer. What? New hidden class? I think it's going to be super fun. After hearing the answer, his friend still agrees and says, let him do what he wants. He's not going to stop him, just asks him to try very hard, to which he agrees. Outside, the sun was already starting to set and evening was approaching. At the same time in Kailan, everything was just fine and bright weather. Some grandfather was meditating, and there were a bunch of artifacts around him. Suddenly, an archer approaches him, and he gets a little wary, asking what he wants from him. He explained that he was looking for a reincarnation, and right after that, the grandfather's eyes turned red, and he said that the guy was exactly in the right place. He pulled a red bottle out of his pocket, which was very shiny, and had already begun to pass it to the guy, when suddenly, he grabbed it abruptly and clarified if he knew the consequences, because after he drinks that bottle, he will lose absolutely all his power and what he has collected for so long, and there will be no way to get it back. He turns to him and tells him that this is why he is going to drink all its contents. After he got the bottle, he went to the mountains to consider and make a decision for himself. For this would be the most expensive rebirth for him, and if he was lucky enough, he could get even better stats than he has now. He discovered a statistic that told of his potion, which was made by ancient alchemists. After looking at it once more and taking it in his hands, the guy decided that he would make many times more money with the new class and decided that it was worth taking the potion right now, which he did. His face changed and the system reported that his level and stats would be reset. Meanwhile, at the training center after the reincarnation, all the people were puzzled and wondered very much how long he could train. They said they had never seen such intense training. At the same time, the archer waving his sword and saying that tomorrow, it will be the final day, when the renewal will come after all. He wanted to approach this as prepared as possible. Meanwhile, the gate opened and there was a purple bright flash around it that blinded everyone around it very badly. Our hero had a scan, which the system informed him of, and welcomed him to the new world of Kailan. His character began to somehow stand out from the rest, as the rebirth had already taken place. The first thing he did was try to find the Summoners Guild, which he did very quickly, since their house was very close by. He walked up to it, opened the doors, and started calling out for someone, clarifying if anyone was in it. Without hearing an answer, he went in and began to examine it. Seeing no one, he decided that he was probably the only one here and the very first to arrive. He began to walk up the steps and entered an interesting large room that was the decision-making center of the guild. There, the master of the Cane Guild was already waiting for him. Harrier came up to him and said he wanted to join their guild. Of course, the master said that the path of the summoner, not easy, and to control the fierce monsters is not for everyone. The archer knows all this, and believes that this class is as strong as it is difficult to master. With which the wizard agrees and says that, most likely, our hero is just the right candidate. But before he is accepted into the guild, he asks one last time, is he really sure he wants to change his class to summoner? To which, of course, our hero agrees and pulls out his crystal, saying that his time has come, and he must give it to the master right now, and holds it out. He began to shine so strongly that the master was in complete shock. His face was in a cold sweat. He was shocked and frightened, for he did not understand where our hero got it from. He also knew the history of the crystal in question, which our archer immediately guessed. And the master complimented him on the fact that it was much more interesting than he had originally anticipated. He smiled and said, "Let's get me into the hidden class." But the master then asked him to do him a favor as well, to which the archer agreed and said he was willing to do whatever it took. And the master began to tell him the story that recently, a blue-eyed wolf had appeared in the plains, and that his son just recently changed his class also to a summoner, and wanted to get himself a blue-eyed wolf, making him his surname. He asked our hero to grab him, which of course surprised him very much, because he did not understand how to do it. And this, absolutely no surprise, because blue-eyed wolf, it is a rare monster that was above level 40. He really didn't understand why such a powerful monster was involved in a level 10 player's class change quest. After all, it seems completely illogical. To which the master replies that since he is busy here with his duties, he cannot go himself, and he is really ashamed to talk about it. But his son is really too weak to defeat this monster. In return for his help, he offers our hero as many as 5 magical binding scrolls. He suggests wearying the wolf as much as possible, and then tying him with these scrolls. He also clarified that the wolf that appeared in the remote plane is still very young, so it should not be too strong, which means it can be easily defeated. And then, a message appears from the system, which will bring him the task of defeating the blue-eyed wolf in the raw mud plain, tying him up, and bringing him and his son to the master. At the bottom there is an offer to accept the challenge or not, and seeing that it is a hidden class, of course agrees, and says that he will bring the wolf at any cost. The master thanked him and sent him on his journey, telling him that if he did not succeed, to come back here immediately, and he would be given help. The archer also realized that the quest would not fail if he failed at once, and went, letting him know that he had heard the wizard. He remembered his training center, and how he began to train hard to improve his efficiency and pump up his skills. Where all the people who looked at him were completely shocked, and were surprised that not everyone can train so intensively. He went, declaring, "Let's finally do it already." As a rule, monsters in the Ramud Plain, all 10th level on average. And if it is a blue-eyed wolf, it should not be too strong, since it is still young. And also, he remembers that even though he is a 10th level, his attributes are already closer to the players of the 30th level. That's why he has to succeed. He pulls out his system to take another look at this adversary. He finds it, and he sees it for what it should be. But here, he was as surprised and frightened, did not understand why he even level 20, although it does not matter to him at all, since his attributes are high. But how is he supposed to fight a level 20, staying only at 10? He did not understand whether the quests of the hidden classes, always such a difficult question mark, and at least he won't have to worry about killing him with a single hit, because that could have happened if he was level 10. He didn't want to drag it out too long, so he tried to get down to business quickly. He gave his bow and aimed the wolf, whereupon the arrow already flew at its recipient. It hit the wolf, which began to growl. He looked in the direction from which the arrow flew at him, and saw our archer. His eyes were very angry. He turned sharply and began to run immediately in the direction of our hero. He began to think that so the wolf can die. So as soon as he approached him, the archer struck him with his fist, which even the wolf tears, and he walked away. But our hero did not stop, and decided that first he will beat him, and then tie it, because in order to do this, the level of health of the monster must drop. After he beat him, he tried to tie him up, but it was unsuccessful. Then the archer began to think what he should do, because if he hits him again, the wolf just might die. That is why there is a logical question. What should he do? How should he be? The archer decides not to think too much, and realizes that first it is necessary to heal him a little, so that he does not die. He takes a piece of meat out of his pocket, and offers to put it in Wolf's mouth, so that he can heal himself, and at least eat something. After the wolf had already moved away, our hero said that it was time to go back to the beating. After that, the wolf started crying. Their actions could be seen even from the very edge of the mountain. The archer restarted the binding procedure. After that, the system turned on and reported that this time, the process was as successful as possible and the blue-eyed wolf was bound. Quite the hero, holding the Asuvoi in his hands, was finally happy that he had succeeded, reasoning that beating it always works. But he, a little bit, began to regret wasting a lot of his time. Probably already a lot of users have changed their class to summoners. That's why he needs to hurry to keep up. He immediately returned to the village, where he was greeted by the master, and told that it was not an easy task, with which, of course, Jan agreed, stating that it was a stubborn wolf, but he was able to overpower him, and held out Asuva. The master could not believe his eyes, and once again asked if he had curbed the blue-eyed wolf. I said yes, and wondered what's basically wrong with that. On the face of the master, there was great surprise. He could not believe his eyes, as he understood that the first quest was to be failed. But our hero succeeded, unbelievably. After this task, our hero asked again, can he now become a monster tamer? To which the master gave him the answer, and said that the job does not suit him. From which our hero was very surprised. Instead, he was offered the role of master, which surprised and delighted him greatly. A system opened up to him, informing him that the guild master was impressed with his potential, and wants to instruct Ian on the path of the master. He was astonished, for he had never heard of a class change quest being set up like this, on which the system reappears to him. She told him that if he accepted the offer, he could become a master tamer, and asked him if he was ready for it. Ian thought it more likely that the Master of Forgiveness. It is a much higher level position than monster tamers. That's why, without thinking for a second, he decided he wanted to become a master. Immediately, everything around him began to shine. Huge lightning bolts appeared. Everything around him was in a purple bright glare that dazzled everything around him. This is how his rebirth into a taming master came about, after which he was given 4 new attributes and 500 reputation points at once. Thanks to this quest, Ian was able to become the first master tamer in history. Our story continues with our hero, named Ian, becoming the first master of taming in history, managing to defeat a huge and scary blue-eyed wolf, who was 10 levels taller than him. And right now, his reincarnation is happening, as well as his home. in which he received his first assignment from Sensei. Everything shines around him. He himself is happy to have become a master tamer. After he got his new role by opening the system, he decided to think about what he should do first. Here he was immediately given a new task, namely to tame the summoned beast. Immediately, everything changed beside him. He was already standing with a staff in his hands and began to say that he would tame the bloody wolf, like in that trailer. It was really something. He should have been a first at Kailan by now. Then he looked up at the mountain, and around it was a very clear view of the blue sky. It seemed that absolutely nothing foretold trouble, even if you could just take a rest. Suddenly, our hero's face changed very much, and he was perplexed. Looking at the bottom, it looks like there were already those who had transferred to the new class, because after him there was an army of almost 20 people who also got their assignments. It looked about as if they were trying to capture the bloody wolf themselves. After looking at them, Ian didn't think anyone would be quicker than him, but decides to go over and see how things are going in general. As suddenly, one takes the staff, reads a book, the second waving something, the third already firing a bow. It seems that this is a whole team of players who decided to go to the next level together. A shot, and the fire hits right into the red wolf, which starts growling. One of them starts shouting out that health is exactly the same as it was before, when our archer tried to capture. In response, the girl offers to simply seal it. The sorcerer takes a suvoi and begins to bind the wolf. Literally a few seconds pass, and he is already trapped. As suddenly, the wolf begins to growl. His eyes begin to pancake. He abruptly begins to jump, and what all in utter bewilderment. No one can believe their eyes. It seems that the wolf really wants to get out, which the rest of the team make it a point not to miss and catch him. And then, just 15 seconds later, the wolf was already out of his trap. Everyone was just shocked and perplexed, because it would be much harder to meet a bloody wolf again, after they had already missed him. How nice that Aang was able to observe him, apparently. It is indeed difficult to capture a monster of such a high class. Also, he concluded that they are also long to find, so he thought it was probably better to start catching absolutely any monster encountered. Looking again into the distance, from the cliff, he decided to think and declared that he was a true gamer, which made him wonder how many wolves he could capture with his score in leadership. Suddenly, by a coincidence, just such under his rock began to pass at least 3 wolves. With absolutely no time to think, the bow and began to shoot, while the sun continued to glare. And now, the first wolf is already lying on the floor, while our hero opens his uvoi. The system informed him that the first wolf had already been successfully captured. It was the most common wolf that lived in the meadows, had fast legs, and also sharp fangs. But the only thing that surprised him was, what is timid? Do monsters really have personalities? Without thinking long, he saw an angry wolf, who apparently was a friend of the previous one, begin to pounce on him. The archer scratched his head and realized that, okay, let's keep going. And again, a shot. From the cliff, you can see not blue sky, but red glare. After successfully catching the wolf, the archer decided to see what its identity was. Suddenly, he could not understand anything. He was completely shocked, because it was also a wolf, but already with a different personality. But his attributes are much higher and called, he is different. Looking at this situation, the archer realized that monsters of the same type and level can, it turns out, have different attributes. At this moment, another pack of wolves began to pass under the rock. That's why our archer decided to check which of these wolves would have the highest attributes. He came up with a genius idea and decided to catch wolves all day. And he will capture those wolves who will have the highest attributes, and again takes a shot into the blue sky. Suddenly, after another capture, the system informed him that his attribute was increased by 1 level after a series of successful captures, from which our hero was very happy. and realized that to repeat and repeat, that's life. At that time, he was added another title, an expert on wolves for capturing a large number of them. His advantage now will be that he will be able to identify the strongest wolves, even without capture. Now he will not have to catch absolutely everyone in a row. Our hero cannot understand why they could not do exactly the same only for all the other participants, although he himself realizes that he is asking too much. Without thinking long, he decides to see how to use his superpower after all, and begins to do his analysis. Among the 4 wolves, he saw at once one level 11, another level 12, another level 11, another level 10 wolves. Based on this, you can understand that the analysis works perfectly. At the same time, he decided to put a lot of emphasis on the level 11 wolf. He walked closer to him and asked himself, would this one be now? At the same time, the wolf's eyes became red. It was obvious that he was very angry and began to growl at him. The archer, not for a second, was not frightened, but only began to laugh and ask the wolf what he would do. Obviously, the wolf rushed at him in an attack, which our hero was, of course, ready for. And he kept smiling, took out his bow, and shot at the wolf, from which he fell quite ridiculously. Now, our hero decided to teach him a lesson, and said that now the wolf seems to know his place, and made a grab for him. After analyzing the wolf, it was clear that he was level 11 as no surprise. But what was really worth attention, and even made our hero's face smile in surprise, was that the wolf was level 11, but his attributes were higher than the wolf at level 13. Besides, it can evolve. Is it really capable of evolution? Other wolves our hero doesn't need anymore. He just needs to focus on training this one. He kindly takes and lets all the other wolves go, while he sits down with his main one, who he wanted to train, and asks him to bark. From that point on, he decided to call him by his new name, which is Lie, and the wolf seems to like his new name too. After that, their closeness increased, and so did Lie's loyalty, as the system itself informed him. He was very surprised because he didn't even know there was such an attribute as fidelity. Great. Now it's time to start hunting, he said to his wolf, which made him growl, and they began to run somewhere together. The only question I have is, how can you love someone who beat you? Meanwhile, the situation in the city began to heat up, with the Lotus Guild becoming much weaker when Jin Sung left it. He said he was changing his class. I wonder how he's doing. That's what his friend was thinking. Who wouldn't let him change his class, and was now sitting there practically alone? That's why he got information about the summoner class and began to study it. He didn't understand what was wrong with those headlines. He decided to look at it more closely and saw the analysis of the archer, that is his friend, in which he reported that he is already summoner 12th level. And here are his conclusions after the hunt. He stated that this class is very funny, and he became a caller at the very beginning of the launch server. But the only thing that embarrassed him, that is, a small disadvantage, is that the experience is very, very slow. All the people who wanted to change the class or have already done it constantly complained that the level increase is very slow. And this is done because the experience is divided between your summoned creatures. Reading all these headlines, his friends started to think that this is just the beginning, so naturally there will be a lot of complaints. But even looking at this picture, things look pretty sad because Jin Sung dropped his character just for this. But it seems to be true that the level rise is very slow indeed at first. He begins to think that it might take a long time to reach level 20 and join the guild. Meanwhile, back to Kailan. The sun has already set behind the mountains, and our heroes continue their hunt. When suddenly, completely unexpectedly, the system alerts Jin Sung that he has already reached level 20. A little earlier in the hunt, he asked his wolf to attack first, immediately after the arrow flew, so that he would not attack first and take damage. He activated another superpower and his dexterity increased by as much as 37%. And so he takes his bow, throws his arrow, and it hits the exact target. Immediately after it, our wolf began to run at the animal. He ran up very quickly, after which immediately bit her and began to fight her. A very strong battle. At this time, our hero was already running up to help, and noticed that his level and attributes lower than the red fox. That's why he ran up to help, but he realizes that the wolf is really very good. Because he attacks without any fear? Maybe it's because of his personality? Once more he praised his wolf, and threw another arrow to help him the wolf. Of course he growled back, and continued to attack the red fox. After this was successfully completed, the system gave them both 265 experience points each. Then the archer realized that the experience is shared equally, which means he needs to pump Lai to at least the 15th level. That's why, without wasting a second, and activates the ability to train the newcomer, and begins to train him. Then asks him to give a paw, then to bring a stick. It was noticeable that the pet's potential improved with each training session. They successfully managed to find a common language, and the pet was able to learn some necessary skills, after which the mutual understanding between them in the team grew. Suddenly, the pet begins to transform into something else. Around him again begins to glow. Everything shines, and the system reports that Lai has already reached level 15. Great. Ready, but the only thing that bothers our hero is that they swing much slower than he thought. Maybe it's probably because the experience is divided equally. Even so, he realizes that Lai is really fun to train with, and he gets a lot stronger with each level he raises. After that, Jean suggests that he now go bear hunting. Now he realizes that he can go to another location to hunt. And so, they are already in the woods near the bridge, around which are walking in clumps of big bears. One of them notices the two friends and starts growling sharply at them. At this time, the system appears and gives our heroes on top of a few more experience points, as well as a notification that they have learned some super skills. And then, the archer realizes that they did not work in vain. I need to see what this ability. It turns out that the blessing of the warrior Berserk gives you and his comrades an increase in attack power, as much as 30% for a full 20 minutes. But if you use it on the pet, it will increase its attack power by as much as 100%. Looking at this situation, the archer realizes that this ability is very good. Further, they began to study the tactics of the newcomer, which they also pumped. It turned out that the leadership increased by 10%, as well as understanding of the orders. And if the leadership also increased, then perhaps already be able to capture the bear. That's why the archer does not waste a second and offers to catch them. But before that, he wonders if there is someone stronger for Lai. Without thinking twice, he immediately begins to make a grab and realizes that his lead has increased significantly, and it is precisely because of the rookie's tactics. He pulls out the stats and wants to compare them to the attributes that Lai has. He absolutely in no way can understand what is happening, and begins to question whether Lai is really a wolf, because then why he does not evolve. Look at this situation. He decides to let this bear go for now, and goes back to the wolf asking if he had a good rest, because it's already time to hunt. He activates several abilities at once, and begins to run with it, ordering it to attract this bear. The wolf immediately ran to carry out the order, and threw himself into the fight. He bit sharply into the bear's neck, and they got into a fight. It was really, really scary to watch. It looked like the wolf was ready to destroy the bear, even though he had a much lower level than the bear. Seeing this situation, the archer asks him to continue, and is surprised that the newcomer's tactics really very good, because his pet perfectly understands what he needs from him. While the wolf and the bear continue to fight, the archer shoots him and they destroy him together. And immediately, there is an alert from the system, which reports that the pet is already upgraded to level 19, which makes everyone very happy. The hero begins stroking his pet and asks him to keep growing, because soon, at this rate, he will no longer be equal. But the only thing he's worried about is that they're too slow to pump. That's why the archer decides to take quests, after the moment when he reaches level 20. Tired, the archer decides that, for today, that will be all. And the gamer's life too. Meanwhile, it's getting dark outside the window. Wiping his head with a towel, John decides he needs to check another forum before going to bed. Surely some losers are complaining again right now. He sits down at the computer and realizes that this is really true. A lot of people start whining about how the summoner is useless. Summoned creatures are too weak, pumping is too slow, and so on. He concluded that there's really too much whining here, but the only thing he was really interested in was if there's any feedback from people above level 15 here, and he was very surprised, because he could not find anyone, despite the fact that he was already level 20th. He began to think there must be a lot of players already above level 15th. But here, on the forum, no one. Oh, he was able to find someone level 13 and decides to check him out. His abilities were exactly the same as our heroes. But the only thing that surprised him was Obsession, in which 30% of a creature's attributes are transferred and summon or absorb the soul of its pet. This very much surprised our hero, because he does not have such an ability. At the same time, he realizes that it really is very good, because you can say that it is the bread of the caller, and since it does not need to share experience, leveling up is much faster, and he concludes, why absorb a pet that can fight itself? Moreover, if also the attributes are not fully transferred. He sits back and thinks that even the level of the summoned beast is not raised. This is the most interesting thing in the game for the caller, and he, for some reason, does not have this ability, although he does not really somehow want it. Suddenly, all of a sudden, he begins to think, what if the abilities of ordinary conscripts are different from his? In that case, he's already settled into his chair and started smiling. If that's really the case, what is his ability that normal summoners don't have? Our story doesn't end there. It just continues. So be sure to subscribe and like the channel so you don't miss out. Well, in the meantime, our story continues from the point where the hero realized that he is really different from others. This is why he decides to determine what superpower he has that is different from other summoners. And so, after taking a sip of water, he guessed that this is what beginner's training is all about. Now the main task is to understand how it still works, since he does not have enough information. But if you summarize, it is easy to guess that the Master of Taming has less fighting abilities than a normal summoner. That's why our hero realized that it was easier for him to pump his pet and concluded that he was moving exactly in the right direction. After which he smiled and was full of confidence. After that, he stepped away from the computer and thought it would be a good idea to capture a monster of a rare or super unique class. Meanwhile, it was dark enough outside, exactly 4 o'clock on the clock. It turns out that our hero had spent the entire night pondering this question. He took another look at his capsule and decided to get into it right away. His idea was that he would pump his Lie Wolf up to level 20 before the sun went down, thanks to his experience and skill. And so, he's already in the woods, standing by his wolf, and he says they're going to do it all now. Wolf looked at him and mentally agreed, whereupon the archer immediately activated to make it easier for Wolf. Thus, the rookie's training began. They also activated the skill of searching for weaknesses, after which the wolf immediately began to attack the bear, and the archer shot his arrow at him, in order to help. He immediately began to growl sharply. It was obvious that he just wants to destroy everyone in his path. Suddenly, the wolf immediately attacked him and sharply bit the bear's neck, from which they had a very quick fight, which resulted in the team destroyed the moon bear and earned 545 experience points each. The archer was as surprised as possible, because he did not expect that so quickly they would be able to destroy this monster. And the archer himself in general went to this forest, back when he himself was about level 35, in a past life, before he did reincarnation. From this, he deduced that his hunting speed was much faster than it had been before. After that, immediately without wasting a second of time, the wolf decided not to wait and immediately pounced on another bear. And the archer decided to help him. Through teamwork, they had already developed a passion, and they just started running and hunting everything in their path together. But suddenly, Jin Sung stopped and thought. He was a little amazed, because in front of them there was a whole bunch of big bears, among which one stood out very strongly. It was obvious that he really looked much bigger than the others. Suddenly, he immediately asked the system to help him deal with this wolf, and blue indicators appeared near his eyes, indicating that it was Jet Black Moon Bear. There was a huge bear who was the king of this forest. He was a unique monster. But instead of fear, our archer had a rather unusual reaction. And the only thing that occurred to him after he sat down on his knees was whether he could capture it. He asked the system, and the system told him that his level was too low to do that yet. All of this because he let go of the last bear, but his leadership is still not enough to make it happen. Therefore, the best solution they could make is to just run away, which they actually started to do, because so far they can't stand up to this bear. The only thing Jin said during this process was that when they were in town, it would be a good idea to get some magical binding scrolls. But time was catastrophically short because the bear immediately began to run after them, which is why our archer decided to suspend him with his arrow, from which he was very much shocked and began to growl sharply, as if to hint that someone will now be very hurt. And after the arrow flew accurately in the target, the wolf also decided not to waste his time and immediately ran to help. In parallel, he roared sharply at the bear and immediately rushed into battle. Even though he was noticeably bigger and stronger, his eyes were red. You could tell he was furious as he started growling back even more. It seemed as if he was about to tear the bear apart. But on the face of our archer, absolutely no panic and fear, because now that the wolf fights almost as well as he does, then monsters even 38th level will not be a problem for them at all. These were the thoughts he had while the bear began to smash the wolf and destroy everything in front of him. At that moment, the wolf's eyes changed just as abruptly. They now had only a blue hue and a noticeable desire to fight, after which he swooped down sharply on the bear, and again managed to hit him in the neck, using his crowning move, from what he simply lost consciousness, and the system informed the guys that they had already managed to destroy even such a bear and received 1.45 experience points, and the pet itself has already been upgraded to level 20, which was a shock to Jean and a joy to behold. Now the full possibilities will only be after you reach level 20, such as registering in the guild, various quests, and so on. The master praised his pet while the bear lay unconscious on the ground. After that, he immediately logged into his system to see what items he had received, and he had a very big smile on his face. It turns out that the system decided to reward the boys with moon bear meat, and also gave them the bear hunter's battle hammer and the black necklace, which was made of coal. Quite a good set, because no one has ever seen anything like this before. At the same time, the wolf also continued to look at the statistics and stood behind his friend. In order to study this, he used the identification scroll and evaluated the necklace. It began to shine very strongly. Everything was a rosy white hue and shone all over the forest. It turns out that this necklace was of unknown origin, created from obsidian, which was exactly as black as the abyss, and it looks insanely expensive. The master remembered that he already had a pretty good necklace from the auction before, but this, much better, from which he began to smile and rejoice, imagining how much money he could already make from this. I also argue that this is his first good reward since reincarnation. Going back to his wolf, he said the items were really good, but the only thing he was interested in besides that was how much Lai's attributes had increased. It turned out that the defense was increased by 2, attack by 4, but dexterity, what is it? For some reason, he was immediately puzzled. Do monsters get much stronger as they level up? No, something still doesn't add up. The master was shocked and couldn't understand what was going on. He picked up the book again and began to study it in detail, taking note of every word, in which he could find roughly the following answer: that there was no pattern in the rate of growth. They made it by accident, didn't they? At that moment, the wolf was just crazy happy, stuck out his tongue, and just enjoyed the moment. But the archer couldn't figure out what was going on, so he realized that he had to find out how it all worked. And then, all of a sudden, it came to him the realization that this potential, it turns out the secret is in the attribute of potential. It may seem difficult now, but training a novice increases the potential of the pet. And every time the potential increases by 10, the attribute growth rate also increases. He knew it, but rookie training is unpredictable enough that he was just furious. And indeed, he was right. The hidden class has its own unique abilities, but each monster also has an attribute potential, which determine the rate of growth of their attributes as the level increases. At this point, the wolf's stats opened up, and he was able to understand that the monster class itself is enhanced by its potential, and it is the ability to train a rookie that enhances it. That's why, after another look at the system, he decided that he would spend all of his skill points on training. It was not an easy decision, but now the system reported that all skill points were spent, and the skill rookie training was raised to level 5 and has already become an intermediate training. Then the system opened up again and told me what would be in this update. It appears that there will be an improvement in the understanding of the master's commands. The potential of the pet will also increase, and the abilities will also increase. And what a good thing it was that the wizard had the good sense to spend all those skill points not on capturing that bear. He was very happy, he was pleased that he could solve this riddle, because the potential of his wolf is now 94, and soon it should be 100, if everything goes at the same pace. They were very happy and proud of themselves. But suddenly he looked at his watch and realized that he had wasted almost an hour of his time. That's why he looked at the wolf, and realized that they need to get experience much faster. After eating his sandwich, he said that if he had been as diligent in his studies, he probably would have been a doctor or a lawyer too. But in the meantime, there's no point thinking about it now, because he's eating his sandwich by the monitor, and he's on a very important mission in the game. Suddenly, he stumbles upon a video of a dark sorcerer, which really shocks him. He looks at them and emphasizes the fact that they are quite cute, although in fact it looks quite intimidating. At that moment, his phone rings, which makes him a little shocked, because he certainly did not expect any call, much less from unknown numbers. As usual, he picked up the phone and immediately, an unfamiliar voice clarified whether he was really talking to Jin Sung. But after he confirmed this, the voice also introduced himself that his name was Lee Ji-hyun, and she was a teacher in the virtual reality department of a Korean university. After that, the face of our hero changed a lot for the better. After which he said hello to her. She asked if he knew Professor Lee Jin-wook. Of course, he's the head professor. And then she said that he asked him to call him, something that the guy was just in shock. His body immediately formed a cold sweat, and he panicked and asked what had happened. And, strange as it may seem, it's probably because of the grades. At this point, the guy threw his phone away and started crying. He really couldn't figure out what. Is he really going to be expelled from the university now? He asked what would happen if he didn't call the professor, and that's why he turned to the girl. She responded by saying that his grades would just go home that way, and of course it was not about his place of residence. At this point, the guy got nervous because he immediately realized where the letter of happiness would be sent. And if his father saw the grades, it would be very, very bad. He immediately had a picture in his mind of Darth Vader as his father, and it was as if he was telling him that he was very disappointed in him. From this information, he suddenly began to panic, very much afraid of being forced to return home at the peak of his adolescence. Gritting his teeth, with a lot of fear and worry, he said he could still call back, after which the girl just hung up and said she'd see him next semester. After the conversation was over, the guy decided there was nothing to retreat from, and we had to do it after all, and started looking for the number. A minute later, the boss picks up the phone and starts talking to him. Surprisingly, he can barely remember who Jin-sung is. Turns out to be a new student. Panicked and not understanding what was going on, the boy decided to ask what they wanted him to do, to which the supervisor asked, "Doesn't he have a clue himself?" In a panic, he started screaming, and he asked, "Is it because of the grades?" When this was confirmed, the director asked if he was all right, and why he was not involved in the life of the department at all, and how in the world he had managed to find himself on the verge of expulsion at the end of the first semester. Was it not because of 3 non-credits in a row? The guy was very surprised because he only had 2 credits, but the director stopped him and said that this is absolutely correct. But right now, he is thinking whether to give him another 3rd. Here, the guy just exploded. He couldn't understand why he was threatening him. Why was he doing that? He was just as angry as possible and wanted to destroy the first object nearby. But as he tempered his anger a little, he practically answered the principal in a calm voice and politely asked what he needed to do after all. First of all, he advised him to figure out how to get rid of the fact that he does not participate in the life of the department. At this point, he decides whether or not to talk, because he can't just say that it's all about the game. So how does he answer the boss? Then he comes up with a genius idea, and he says that, "Sir, you see, the reason why he chose the virtual reality department is because he admires the unbounded potential of virtual reality." The director didn't quite understand what he meant and asked him to continue. And one of the reasons for the popularity of virtual reality is the game Kailan, the guy clarified. And after the director confirmed this, it was as if the guy's hands were untied, and he went on to say that his main task now was to study virtual reality from the inside. His boss interrupted him a little and asked him if he really didn't come to the university because he was playing a game all day, to which the guy replied that he was not just playing, but exploring the incredibly detailed virtual world that is available in the game. The director just sits in shock and does not understand what kind of nonsense the student is telling him, but still decides to ask what his level is, from which the guy was certainly shocked, because he certainly did not expect such a question. But that's okay. The director immediately replied that he was just asking about the level of the guy, because if he worked so well and so hard, he should have been ranked among the best players in Korea, shouldn't he? At this point, the guy got really nervous because if he hadn't deleted his account and reincarnated, now he could really prove it all to him. But now he had to excuse himself and went to the director, saying that there was a slightly different situation. He immediately remembered his character, which he now has level 20, but also continued that he originally had level 93. But because he recently dropped his character and did a reincarnation, he now only has level 20. To which the director just laughed and said that it was really very funny, even though the guy wanted to prove that it was really true. In response to this, the principal only asked not to hold him for a fool. Because does the guy really think that if he says it confidently, you can avoid problems with your studies? He really tries to avoid problems, but he can't think of anything better to do than to suggest an argument to the director. He was really shocked, because no student had ever offered him anything like that before. The boy suggested a bet to prove whether he was lying or not, which really interested the boss, and he asked, will the guy really reach level 93 before the next semester starts? To which he confidently replied yes, and asked if he could reach level 93 before the beginning of the semester. Wouldn't that prove he had it? True, of course, the principal himself sometimes plays in Thailand, because if he succeeds, it will solve all his problems with his studies. Now admit it, would you like to get exactly the same director? Write your answers in the comments or like to see how many of us? But if he fails, not only will he go to a retake, but the principal will also talk to his parents about their son's future. A little worried, the guy still agrees. But the director went on to say that the guy should be involved in the life of the faculty. Besides, he added that if he won the argument, he would give the guy credit for all his classes, regardless of attendance, because he knew the guy would screw up anyway, and he wouldn't get anything done. Hearing such good news, the boy was very happy, but still asked the director whether he would really keep his word, which the latter affirmed in the affirmative. The guy thanked him and said he was going to try his best, because it's incredible. Immediately after they talked on the phone, the guy got into his game pod without further thought, and then, a second later, he is in the game, along with his partner Wolf, which begins to greet him and growl kindly. He strokes him, and says that after all, they will have to work very hard, to which the wolf, of course, agrees. But there is absolutely nothing complicated or new in this, because the guy was planning to get back to his previous level anyway, and since he avoided retakes, now nothing will distract him, and he can do it absolutely no problem. Especially since he'll also get credit without even attending classes, so he'll definitely do it. Having received a charge of motivation, he looks at the building and realizes that first he still needs to join the guild, which is why he approaches the merchant and informs him of this. He greets the guy and asks, most likely he has reached level 20, so which guild would he like to join? The guy starts smiling and says that he likes the Lotos Guild and would like to join it. But unfortunately, his interlocutor upset the guy, because the desired level to join the Lotos Guild, a minimum of 60. But in order for the guy not to get too upset, the man informed him that he would place his request, but still not sure if he would be considered, so if it suits him, he can continue. The guy agrees, smiles and says that the guild leaders are his best friend and he's really close to those who make decisions there, so it's not that important. Well, in the meantime, the man informed him that he had placed his request to join, and he will be automatically registered when the guild master accepts it. Great! Jin was very excited and asked if he should text Hyun to accept his application. But unfortunately, he's offline. But that's okay, because it's not that the guy was in a hurry. Let him have no reason to worry, because his application will be accepted anyway. Immediately thereafter, he moved into the auction house and began to glow with a blue flame that signaled that teleportation was now taking place. He laughed and realized that his job now was to get himself some gear. His advantage of being a very successful newcomer, which is why he would change all his equipment with the best items he could find. But there is an interesting point. The bonus attributes of the summoner class are not added to his combat attributes, but only to attributes that help with summoning, such as taming. The master thought about it and realized that sooner or later his pets would become his main power. He continued to look around the store, and he wondered if there was something here that could improve the attributes of his pet already. For example, could it be some item that would be enchanted to enhance? Suddenly, something made him very suspicious. This was Mother Nature's armband, thanks to which all pets can receive a 20% bonus to their survivability and a 15% bonus to their attack gain. Moreover, the chance for a pet to return from a projectile increases by 5% at once. Seeing this offer, the archer didn't think much of it and realized that he would definitely take it, after which the system informed him that he bought this armband for 150,000 gold. He was very happy that the items for the summoners were finally starting to be sold. But suddenly, he thought, perhaps there are other Mother Nature items for summoners? He turned to the system and entered Mother Nature in the search, and was very surprised, because quite a few other options were found. For example, it gives all pets a 35% boost in attack power, and increases critical hit chance by as much as 15%. It turns out quite an interesting dilemma, because the archer uses a bow but a staff. Should he really take it? It's not clear yet. But why should he think he won't use his bow right forever? That's why he's spending practically all of his funds on this method, which immediately, again with magical blue glare, passes into his hands. After the deal has already been closed, the archer looks at his inventory and realizes that it's still pretty early, but it would be nice to get used to a different style of battle. So far, it is really very strange to hold the staff in his hands and very unaccustomed. But in the meantime, he and his wolf standing near the arch, after which the master performs a call. It turns out that the average training works even in cities, so it is better to use it constantly. That's why, in order not to waste time, the team right now begins a period of quests. Meanwhile, the weather in the city was very clear. It was very warm, and the birds were drinking, as suddenly someone shouted out and said that others should also look at it, for there was a caller in front of them. But it didn't end there, and he went on to say that his pet is a miserable wolf who must have a very low level. There was absolutely no reaction from the master, while a bunch of people surrounded him completely unnoticed at once, half of whom were in shock. One of them added that he heard that the summoner has a very slow pumping, and he does not know if anyone has reached at least level 15. But the team had absolutely no reaction to them, not wasting their precious time and energy. Instead, the archer said he would take up the quest to clear the camp, as during its execution experience for goblins will be doubled. But he said he would get the whole experience alone. At this time, they saw their first NPC for quest, whom they immediately approached and said hello. The master waved his hand and hoped the character hadn't forgotten him after the reincarnation. He answered right away, "Oh, look at that. It's Ian." A dialogue immediately ensued between them, during which the master asked how he was doing. He also noticed that the character's attitude didn't seem to reset toward him, which is very good. He asked if they had had any problems with the goblins, to which the NPC replied, just about to say that they had had some problems because of the goblin camp, since their mopping up team couldn't deal with them. "I assume you know a good mercenary who can really help?" "I will personally take care of it," replied the master, and smiled, to which the NPC thanked him and said it would be very cool, but it would be better to take someone else. Meanwhile, the master looks into his system, which is already showing him the information in green. And there is a new mission, clearing the goblin camp in Somer Canyon. And it is also reported that Raphael, who is the leader of the city, is looking for people in the sweep team. Is our hero ready to accept this assignment? The archer smiled a little and seemed to remember everything correctly. Suddenly he got nervous. The quest is a group one. That's why he began racking his brains thinking about whom all the same can be invited, because it is unlikely in the guild there are newcomers who will be below level 40. Then he stops and asks if he can't postpone the sweep until he can find a group. "Sure. I can do that for you. Maybe you can take care of the goblin scouts?" asked him the NPC, around whom the system continued to glow with the notification that the team had received a quest. Thus, the system has already offered them a new mission, namely to eliminate goblin scouts in Somer Canyon. Thanks to the fact that the archer had just been bailed out, he said he would certainly look into the matter, to which the new character thanked him profusely. The only thing our hero didn't like was that it would take 30 minutes to get there and back. It's a little annoying, but that's okay. After that, he decides to log into his system for a second to see if Yuhain, who was online at the time, is online. He was very lucky because he decided to go into correspondence with him, because he asked to accept his request to join the guild, after which they had a dialogue. "What? A request to join? You're already level 20? Yeah, I just got it. Wow, it's true, you're a monster. I accepted your request. Dude, how did you get to level 20 so fast? I've heard that even the dark wizards, who are known for their speed, never made it to the 20th level." To which our master replies, "Have you forgotten who you're talking to? I'll catch up with you shortly, so get ready." "Yeah, okay, hurry up. It's tough without you." Well, their dialogue didn't end there, and Ian decided to ask who in our guild is about level 40, The Hyun was very surprised, saying that there's no one yet, and asked what he wanted. "Come on, no big deal, I'll figure it out myself," the archer replied and left. He decides to look in the guild chat room, because it's better to find a guild helper than to look for some other character. That's why he goes into the chat room and tells the team that he's back, and asks how the guys are doing. The team immediately greets him and wonders how he's already reached level 20. Another person also asked, isn't leveling up for a summoner awfully slow, or was that nonsense? To which our hero, with particular enthusiasm, answers his friends that this is only level 20th, nothing special, and soon he plans to return to his original level on what the team. He was very much supported, because without him, they are very, very hard. Taking advantage of the opportunity, the guy also asked the guild if anyone was level 40. But Hyun couldn't understand why he was looking for a level 40 begging sign. Here our archer had a rather interesting idea that amused him a bit, because he wondered, would everyone be shocked if he told them about the quests with goblins at level 20? That's why, without wasting a second, he simply continued that he plans to do the quest of clearing the goblin camp. But it's a group assignment. That's why he's looking for one more person to stand up for himself in the camp. Although, without thinking long, he said that he needed absolutely anyone, because he can cope completely alone. To which his team just had the utmost surprise, and they decided to clarify. Doesn't he have level 20? How is he going to do the quest with the goblins camp? And say he can do it by himself? Another person from their guild also joined in the dialogue, and began to criticize the hero. Allegedly, he travels only at the expense of other players. There was a conflict in the guild. Some were in favor of the idea, while others were against it. But Ian, like a true leader, replied that he has a very strong pet, so he thinks he can do the quest on his own. Or rather, he bets all on his pet. Dude, looks like good luck is on your side. He starts smiling and getting a little embarrassed, at which point another person also added to the dialogue, and said that now it's clear how he got level 20 so quickly. But the one who first criticized him said he had a friend of about level 45, which made the archer very happy, and asked them to meet. But Carvin tweaked it a little, saying that the thing is that she has a production class, so her fighting abilities are a little off. But that didn't bother him, and he just asked what her class was, and it turns out she was just a cook. This, of course, surprised our character quite a bit, and he decided to ask again, is she really a cook? To which he received a positive response, although he understands that it is unlikely she will be useful in battle. But if he does not mind, she can go with him. Of course, he was all for it, and simply asked him to write her when she was in the game, to which his companion decided to ask again if he was sure. After all, he just needed someone to just start this quest. He absolutely does not care what the skills will be. That's why he answered affirmatively that yes, he is ready. After that, he said he still has a lot of work and left the chat room, saying that he likes to correspond, but not so much. Feeling confident in his abilities and again the desire to do something, he decides that it is necessary to deal with the previous quest before Carvin wrote him. Meanwhile, the weather in the woods is very nice. There's even a waterfall and a river. Suddenly, the master takes a closer look and sees a flock of leopards. It turns out that it was a level 30th monster, though it looked very cool and quite harmless. As suddenly, in his mind, he looked at him again and convinced himself of that. At that moment, the wolf took another step on the ground and decided just to turn around and walk away from the master, to which he reacted very strangely, and very much hoped that he could not read his mind, right? It was obvious that the wolf was really offended by him, after which the archer went up to him and told him that he was really very dear to him, specifying whether the wolf himself knows about it, to which he simply closed his eyes and made a quiet threat. After that, the archer had no desire to do anything further. He was just as very upset. It was obvious that he was very ashamed of his act, and it was unclear how to redeem himself. As suddenly the wolf began to glow with blue flame, smoke formed around him. He began to growl, and the archer absolutely did not understand what was happening to him. He was in a panic and tried to figure out what was going on after all. and turned to his system for help. But all to no avail, when suddenly he realized something. And was it really so? Suddenly, the wolf's eyes turned demonic red, and a red lightning formed around him, which seemed to communicate that something unpleasant was going on. Turns out it was evolution. Finally, he was evolving. Jan was very happy because finally his friend was starting to become even cooler and even stronger, and he had a smile of happiness in his eyes. But he still couldn't understand why he was evolving now. What was even the requirement for evolution? At this time, the process continues, and the wolf is no longer even visible, all in a blue and white glare. It finally happened. The archer was immensely happy, because finally his potential reached 100. I wonder if his appearance would change if he evolved? At this point, the archer began to fantasize that it would be very cool if his wolf got bigger. That way he could already eat on it. At that moment, the wolf began to appear before him, already in a red form. And the explosion and flash from the evolution was visible throughout the forest, all the way up to the sky. The wolf visibly changed and began to growl, from which our hero was only glad, because now his friend, to whom, of course, he was guilty, transformed in front of him in a completely new image. He was very strong and beautiful, and evolved into a wolf with a blood-red mane. Then came the system which reported that the mastery of the ability medium training increased as a result of the evolution of the pet, and also increased its glory by 15 due to the fact that his pet for the first time successfully evolved. He was very happy and could not contain his emotions with happiness, praising his wolf. He went up to him, stroked him, and complimented him, saying he loved him very much. I hope the wolf has already forgotten what happened 10 minutes ago. Then the system opened his statistics and reported that he has a unique ability, vampirism, which takes 15% of damage to enemies, and, on a critical hit, it rises to 50%. Moreover, now the wolf with a red mane has a more aggressive temperament. After that, the archer approached him and noticed that the discharge had changed from normal to rare, which meant that the wolf could still evolve. But if he does it again, will his discharge once again change to unique? As suddenly he opened his system and began to smile very much. It seems that this class is definitely some kind of crazy. He immediately turned to his friend and said that he would never choose another, even if there were 1,000,000 of them, once again pointing out that he would choose lie. Thus he apologized for his behavior. Immediately afterwards, he asked how the wolf thought he could carry the archer already on his back. Absolutely no time to think. The wolf lay down on the ground, and then the team immediately ran forward for their adventures. The master was very much pleased, and ordered the wolf to run forward. His happiness was boundless, because now finally he would not have to walk. It looked like the wolf was happy too, and was absolutely fine with it, as the team ran as hard as they could, leaving only dust behind them. Meanwhile, very strange things were happening in Summer Canyon. It seemed to be completely covered with fog. The archer immediately drew attention to it, saying that it was like a gloomy place, with which the wolf, of course, agreed. And here's an interesting point. He could not understand why kailan is so realistic. So he asked his wolf. He started stroking him, and he said that his assignment was to deal with 10 goblin scouts. With absolutely no thought at all, he immediately opened his system to see what was going on. And now that Lai has become so cool, he just can't afford to stop there, saying they're about to have a lot of fun. Immediately thereafter, he activated all possible abilities in order to make the pet's agility and dexterity, and anything else possible, improve in order to win, and have a good time. After that, the wolf began to glow blue light. He was very much pumped up his skills, after which they immediately saw an army of goblins. It is worth noting that this time our archer was already capable, leaving his usual projectile at home. He immediately ordered his partner to attack them first, after which he would immediately run after him. He looked at those goblins again, and realized that with all the enhancements, the wolf's attributes couldn't be less than those of some pathetic goblins. In addition, its combat intelligence should be incomparable to ordinary monsters. After which he began to look at his wolf, which sharply ran to attack, without thinking for a second. But that's not all. Our master looked at him and remembered that in addition, now Wolf has 2 unique abilities. But there are always problems, so he immediately turned to the system in order to reach the vulnerability of opponents. It turns out that the weakness of the enemy was detected, after which another team received a plus of 91% damage when hitting the weak point. The wolf was just furious. It wanted to tear everything in its path. It began to growl. Everything around it became sharply in red glare. The goblins looked at him and were a little shocked, for they had not expected to see such a bloody wolf, and realized that he would attack them. But before they knew it, the pet had already inflicted critical damage on them. So they were shocked and lost more than 1,000 health units. But that's not all after that. The goblin scout took another 215 points of damage per second, because he was bleeding, after which he was already eliminated. This has never happened before, but it turns out that this is his new ability. After which immediately appeared a system that notified the top that the team destroyed Goblin Scout, and received for it 1,210 experience points. But our hero was just shocked by this. He could not understand how a monster of level 40 died from just one blow. At that moment, the wolf got up on its hind legs and showed that it was the king of this canyon. At this point, the goblins became very angry. They wanted to avenge their friend, and were already holding weapons in their hands, thus showing their readiness to go into battle. The archer absolutely could not expect this, and was a little shocked because the goblin suddenly hit our wolf with his mace, which he received 294 points of damage. It was very painful, as suddenly wolf and was very aggressive. Then immediately, and with all his might, he hits the goblin with his paw, and deals him another 495 damage. The system then immediately informed him that it restored him to 75% health, and gave him another 15% damage. Great. It looks like the staff is really working, and it's working as it should. And then another goblin fell in exactly the same way, and brought 75 health. It turns out the system rewards recovery in health after the enemy is defeated. Suddenly another goblin flew into the sky, and then another goblin who survived looked at the situation, and was simply stunned. He was so shocked that he simply could not even move. Suddenly, he was suddenly attacked by an angry wolf, who wanted to destroy him, which is actually not surprising at all. Immediately afterwards, after a second of time, he attacked this goblin and gave him a critical hit, after which the system informed him that it restored 523 health units, and even gave him 50% damage. Our master was so shocked that he didn't even have to do anything. He just turned to his wolf to understand what was happening at all, because he absolutely did not expect this. After it was over, he immediately went up to him and thanked him for his efforts, once again apologizing as if he had said something about the other pets. Then he hugged him tightly but said it was time for round 2 and asked the wolf to get ready, which of course he was looking forward to. Immediately afterwards, when they saw the goblins, Wolf began to glow pink-blue, for the wizard had activated his hologram thanks to his staff. Immediately after that, the wolf threw himself into battle and began to fight his opponents, at a time when the wizard had absolutely nothing to do. He just activated his skills and lay on a rock, reading his book. Why not? Right after that, he logged in and saw that his friend had texted him asking if he was okay and offering to talk. After that, the moment he saw this message, he realized that, in principle, enough was enough, and called his partner to him at once, despite the fact that he still had the goblin in his teeth. And right after that, he entered into a dialogue saying that, in principle, He could talk and nothing complicated. It turns out that the guy's girlfriend texted him, saying that she was already in the game. Jin Sung was overjoyed and asked if she could help him, to which she agreed. The girl's name was Heron, and she asked for a guy to write to her. From what the archer was so happy that he could not even describe it in words. But at that moment, his friend definitely decided to ask him if he had changed his mind. After all, the girl has absolutely no ability to fight, and he was really quite amused. Who did he think he was? Immediately thereafter, he decided to calm him down by telling him to stop worrying, and that he had just cleared Summer Canyon on his own. What is that place over there where the goblin camp is? You hunt Odin? Yeah. I wiped out all the goblin scouts in the outer camps and raised 5 levels in half a day. At this point, his friend began to worry that the archer cheats or uses some bugs, because in the case of what he cannot help him if he banned. But he assured him that everything is fair, and there is absolutely no need to worry. Even a friend of his commented that, at this rate, he would quietly return to his former level soon. Jin Sung was very happy, and started smiling because he can reach level 100 in just 2 months, which he asked his friend to wait. He began to analyze that he would reach level 50 in 15 days, and level 80 in another 15 days. And then there will be 1 more month, after which he will pump up to level 100. He stood with his staff in his hands and continued to dream, for the thought that he would win the bet kept him busy. After all, when this happens, this gathering will help him a lot. So without wasting a second, he asked if the girl's name was exactly Horan, and immediately texted her, after which a little dialogue was formed between them, during which she told where it is and said she wanted to patch her equipment. After which the archer immediately asked to stay in the forge, and said he would be in 10 minutes. He made it a little early, and just 5 minutes later he was already in the village, and began to look for his forge, because he remembered that it was somewhere around here. He looked around and started smiling, his mood very cheerful and happy, because he was really doing well, especially since he saw such a beautiful girl standing slightly bent over against the wall. He immediately went up to her and said hello and told her what she had been told about him. She was very pretty, and said her name was Horan, and she had heard a lot about our archer from Gawain. Ian immediately asked if they were friends, to which she replied that they were just close companions, biting her finger. She also said that she had finally finished her training and was ready to go into battle with him at any moment, asking if our master was ready. To which, of course, he answered yes in the affirmative. Besides, he asked if the girl had any special reason to go on this quest with the goblin camp. It turns out that, yes, there is a quest she keeps busy, but in order to take it, you need to do the quest with the camp. This is a quest from Duke Trepin's chef, but in order to perform it, you must first go to the castle. The master was a little perplexed, because he really couldn't understand why she would accept a quest from the chef, to which the girl smiled very sweetly and said that her production class is a chef. Chapter 9. But in the meantime, the master also added that he had already heard from Gawain that her class was precisely that of a cook. The girl also added that in real life, she is also a chef. The guy went on to say that he had heard from you that this was not the easiest class to take, but it must be a little easier for the girl, since she does it in real life, just the same. She, of course, agreed, said it was also more fun, which the guy was a little shocked about because she was so very pretty. Moreover, in the end, he added that her real-life skills affect how good he is at gaming classes. He couldn't stop admiring her, and said she was the first cook he had ever met anyway. He looked at her and just didn't know how to surprise her, so he asked her to cook something delicious next time, and that the girl, of course, agreed, looking at him with her sweet eyes. Immediately after that, they were greeted by a new character who said that the master finally found a member of the squad. After that, he added that 2 people might not be enough, but knowing the strength of the guy, He did not say anything and just said that he trusts his choice, greeting the girl. The main group had just left, so the boys could catch up with them if they hurried well. But he also advised them to work together. And so the boys are already looking forward to their new task, which is to conquer the goblin camp at Samora Canyon. Then the system once again informs him that Raphael, the leader of the Vigilante City, asked him to join the team of enslavement in order to help them sweep the camp goblin. In addition, while the quest continues, the team receives double experience for the destruction of goblins. And immediately the master noticed that the description of the quest did change slightly, apparently because of his lateness, but the rewards remained the same. It's good. He immediately approached his girlfriend and asked if she had received the quest, to which she replied in the affirmative. Then he waved his hand and said it was time to go on the road. Immediately after that, our hero's pet appeared in front. The girl was very surprised to see it, but the boy reassured her, telling her not to worry, because it was his pet, not a monster. And then the girl immediately guessed that he was summoning Ale, and filled in that it had only been a couple of days since the new classes. How could he already take on such a complicated quest? There was a smile on her face and astonishment. She could not admire the master exactly as well, for she was looking at him with very great admiration, to which he simply replied that he was lucky. For this wolf is not quite ordinary, and he can level up quickly, and his strength is very easily enough to overpower this bunch of bobkin. He stroked his wolf a little and blushed a little, because he knew that this excuse is very bad, because if he said that he is only level 25, she would absolutely not believe him. And the girl looked at him again and thoughtfully put her hand on his chin, saying that she was really jealous of him, because she was only level 45, and she still always runs away when she encounters goblins. To which the boy was a little surprised, as the girl believed him very easily. But he decided to calm her down a bit by saying that it probably had something to do with her crafting skills. Patamusta's crafting class isn't 100% learned yet, and it does have a lot of different variables. That's why there's no point in caring about goblin scouts at level 45 if you're a tinkerer. The girl thanked him, and already begun to get a little dark outside, and the sun was setting over the horizon. But the girl also continued her story, making a note that the wolf did look very cool. So she really couldn't even remember if she had seen anything like that before. The smile also did not leave the guy's face, and he continued to impress the girl. Said it seems that at the moment the wolf is the only one on the server. The girl was delighted and asked if he had a name. The boy kindly introduced him by saying that the wolf's name was Lai. The girl said hello to him right away and ran to pet him. She said he had a very nice name, and would he mind if she gave him some treats? Which made her smile a lot. Well, the guy said that the wolf likes to eat delicious food. Immediately after that, the girl gave him a delicious steak, which every one of us would eat right now, wouldn't we? That's why our hero was just as shocked, because he wouldn't mind eating such a steak right now either, which made him drool on his lips. Well, the wolf, do not waste precious time, immediately ate a smoked steak, thanks to which within 20 minutes he will increase his survivability by another 200 points. Our master was simply shocked. He absolutely could not understand what had happened after he had received a notification from the system. He was so happy and surprised at the same time, because the characteristics of his wolf had increased immediately after her cooking. The girl said that when the cooking skills reach an advanced level, the cooked food gives an advantage. The guy was just surprised by this information, but said that the wolf's health points were just under 1400. So the added 200 would be a very significant bonus. That's why he decided that he had to make friends with her. But more importantly, he had a really good meal, and it would have been nice if he could have eaten it all by himself. Instead, he was a little offended by his wolf, because he ate all the food himself. Not giving up hope, the guy approached the girl and asked if she had anything to eat, just for him. She said she didn't have anything yet, unfortunately. But she asked him not to get upset, because she will make him something delicious after the quest, so she asked him not to be jealous. The boy was a little shocked because he does not know how to talk to girls, especially when she still made him a promise. Meanwhile, very strange things were happening in Cupid's Canyon. Everything was almost dark now. The sun was setting over the horizon, and a bunch of people were starting to gather there. It looked like it was some kind of guild because the girl immediately informed their leader, Enslavement Hugo, that ground reinforcements had arrived. Immediately, one of them fell to his knees, the literalist saying that the new faces were just such on time. Thank them for showing up, but our foreman, like a true polite man, said he was always glad to help, and was maximally glad that they were absolutely not late this time. Suddenly, he immediately looked at the other players. He absolutely did not understand what was going on. For some reason, they all looked very upset. But he did not care, because they will fight separately, only he and his new girlfriend, whom he would like to invite for coffee after the end of this quest. But in the meantime, the Guild of Men were looking into the distance. A fog had formed around them, and it seemed to be very scary indeed, as all of a sudden goblins with weapons in their hands suddenly appeared and started shouting. But the Legion was determined, saying that they would exterminate all the goblins of Salmore Canyon, urging their entire army to march forward. Suddenly, the goblins also ran towards them to fight. The girl who was watching this situation was a little scared, so she asked the guy, "Is this really all normal?" But he saw her, that everything would be all right, and ordered her simply to do as he told her. The girl asked him again if she was sure of her strength, for he would be the only one to fight, to which the guy said that he really wasn't sure, and she would really come in handy for him as well, as her shield strike does not insignificant damage. But because of her fear, her shield-related skills are very well pumped. That's why he formed an interesting plan in his head, in which the girl will simply take the role of a tank, and he will follow her and deliver damage to goblins. All this and the fact that the goblin camps her level is relatively high. Moreover, he didn't stop there and added that, in addition, her shield skills are comparable to those of level 60. This information he was very happy, and added that in other words, she will not be afraid of death, because she will be a tank. And after the girl provokes goblins, she and the wolf will immediately take all the experience. And after that, he thought to himself that she was here with him, so that he could make the best use of her. And like a true gentleman, he said that, in fact, she was just cannon fodder. But the girl looked at him sweetly once more and smiled, saying that she trusted him, although the probability of her death is absolutely not zero, to which Ian, like a true gentleman, told her to trust the wolf, not him. And because of this battle plan, he added that she would also gain a lot of experience if she didn't die. He got a little sad, as it was not because of her very good cooking. As suddenly, absolutely unexpectedly, goblins rushed into battle, to which the girl immediately activated her account in order to and provoke. Everything was in the blue glare. Goblins absolutely could not approach her. And then the guy immediately asked her how long she could last like that, to which the girl replied that a full 10 minutes at least. Well, the guy said she was much better than he thought. Maybe he was too worried about someone at level 40. He looked at her one more time. At the moment, one goblin had already been destroyed, then realized she was okay, and ran into battle. At this point, his wolf began to completely dominate us, even though they are much stronger than the previous ones. And now the system is already beginning to give him experience for destroying one goblin after another. He also notices that the experience is shared bio waiting for him, girl and wolf, but even so, there is a lot of it. A few minutes later, the system tells him that his level is already raised to level 26, which he is unspeakably happy about. And then a second later, he receives another notification that he is already level 27. It was really very exciting. He couldn't believe it. Meanwhile, the fighting was still going on in the canyon, when suddenly some man, very much like our master, came up behind him and asked, "Who are these guys?" At this moment, our master was destroying one goblin after another, as suddenly the girl began to say that he was very much like a user, but already high enough to be here. That's why the guy called 2 more of his friends to come over and look at it with their own eyes. Although they didn't understand what was going on, he immediately pointed them to the master and his wolf, and asked the guys what they thought about it. They said right away that it was a summoner, but that wasn't the problem. The guy added that in order to hunt here, he had to be at least level 40, while the fighting ability of this wolf looks really above level 60. And the girl also added that the Kel user was released not so long ago, so how can it be level 40 so quickly? At most it could be level 20, which of course she was a bit shocked, and said that it really is. Between them continued dialogue, during which the guy added that this is indeed true, because he had read on the forums and noticed that the strongest player was then still level 17 or 18. At this point, our wizards were destroying one goblin after another, with their wolf, showing the others their strength and greatness. At that moment, they began to wonder what kind of wolf the guy was using. At that moment, one of them wondered if it could be an artifact with summoning magic, as suddenly one of them had an idea, and said that he thought that by looking at them fight, one could conclude that they were newbies, because the guy uses his staff in hand-to-hand combat. That's why he doesn't think he has offensive spells, and he's already starting to clench his fists, as if intending to attack and destroy him. At this point, the guys on his team were very wary, for is he really suggesting that they destroy a player like him? As suddenly, one of them, I interrupt, said not to be so loud there, after which she apologized and added, "Aren't the guys too reckless?" Other than that, she said it wasn't worth it if they didn't want to get good gear from them. The penalty for such an action is quite severe. It will be very difficult indeed to regain their lost reputations. And at this point, the most important of them decided that this is their chance. So he suggested thinking again. One magical artifact summoning could bring them at least 20 million gold. That's about 7 million for each of them. And from this information, the guys were just shocked, because that's over 40 million won. They had already started to present this money. Just as suddenly, the most important one of them added that if they did it right now, I'd have to worry about their equipment too, at least until level 80. And he asked if his team really wanted to miss such an opportunity. Without waiting for their response, he continued that he had a very good plan. At this point, the wolf continued to smash goblins, covering the girl and demonstrating his power. Well, the guy in the meantime also looked that very soon he would be already level 30. After that, he went into the system and noticed that each player gets 2 class skills for every 30 levels, and he wondered what would he get. He remembered what the forums say about them being 100% random, but that's actually not true. He looked at the system again to make sure and realized that one of them would be associated with the most rolled skill, while the other would be random, which is why they are both absolutely not random. He immediately started looking at his best skill and got very excited. He discovered it in his arsenal and realized that it was an average training. This is exactly the kind of skill that increases potential. Maybe he would get one skill that would be related to potential? At this point, a goblin came at him, but he just hit him with his stick. Absolutely no distraction from his reading. Moreover, he went on to say that the other one would have to be completely random, but he really wished he had something to do with farming. At this point, the situation was only beginning to heat up as the girl informed him that she only had 5% of her holy power left. It was obvious that she was already having a really hard time keeping up that kind of protection. But the boy was absolutely not distracted by his reading in the system. So he asked the wolf to help her and ordered him to protect her, which he actually ran to do. At that moment, he unleashed absolutely all the goblins that were near her, dealing them critical blows. At this point, the girl thanked him and started stroking him, since he helped her a lot. The guy was already getting a little jealous, because this hairball got along very well with the girl. But he was not so friendly with him. He had already started to cry a little, but decided that he would deal with the matter right after the quest was over. At this point, the wolf realized that something was going wrong, and there was also a lack of understanding in his gaze. As suddenly the canyon began to collapse abruptly. There was smoke from the fire near it. Even the goblins in their tents also didn't understand what was going on. Suddenly, the most important of the goblins said that humans dared to set foot on their land. That's why he was very aggressive and ordered to destroy absolutely every one of them. Immediately after that, he used his staff to do magic. Right after that, everything in the canyon became very gloomy and smoke. Some kind of horror seemed to be approaching. People began to run away in panic, asking for someone to come to their aid, as their armor was already on fire. One of them realized that it must have been the chief, looking directly in the direction he was. At this point, he ordered his guys to get ready, because this fight will only end when they destroy this goblin. In the meantime, our wizard had his allies' morale increased by 30%, which he was not fabulously happy about. Immediately afterwards, the human guard ran into battle, but the system also informed him that all stats would be increased by 10% for 20 minutes. He also ordered his wolf to start attacking, whereupon it immediately rushed into battle, snarling and tearing apart one goblin after another. He was very much in a rage and aggressive. At this moment, while the goblin chief absolutely could not believe what was happening, and could not even believe his eyes, at this moment, while he was still thinking, the wolf was already rushing at him as hard as he could. At that moment, the goblin rose higher and began shouting at the wolf, saying that he was just a beast that had been raised by humans. At this point, he jumped up on him and gave him a critical hit that really knocked the goblin chief down. The system reported that his health was reduced immediately by 12 units. He was very shocked and didn't expect such a thing from the little brute. In addition, the system reported that he would take 242 damage per second due to the fact that he was bleeding. At this point, the region leader also ordered his guys to launch a joint attack immediately. At that moment, the goblin flew up and waved his staff, after which everything immediately began to collapse and a huge wave of smoke formed, because of which there was absolutely nothing visible, except only his terrible red eyes. At that moment, the goblin chief began to roar and was very angry. But the system reported at this moment that he only had 52,071 health points left, which was as much as 30% of his total stats. And at that moment, he began to growl, trying to bring down everything in his path. It looks like the battle was just beginning to develop. And it was at that moment that the goblin chieftain gained berserk status. Immediately after that, he became like a demon and was ready to destroy absolutely everything in his path. And from this, our master was also very much frightened. Besides, all the people who were near him were in a panic, as they did not understand what was happening to them so suddenly. At this point, our hero really got very tense. It was obvious that something really worried him, and a few seconds later, a very strong goblin flew into him. And then the guy flew back a few meters and got hit by another rock, which caused him to lose 684 more health units. Immediately after that, he flew back down at a tremendous speed and started sliding on the ground. After that, he immediately looked at his arm and cried. He was really in a lot of pain. The only thing he was thinking about was that he needed to heal now. At that moment, absolutely unexpectedly, a blue glow appeared in front of him, and he was surprised at the fact that he was the girl who had put a healing light on him. It was Heron who had put a healing light on him, which restored the guy 120 health units. He was very surprised and delighted at the same time, or rather in whether the girl could really create a healing light. At this moment, she was looking at him from her shield, and the boy really continued to admire her. Immediately afterwards, he smiled and looked at her. Thanking her very much, the girl continued to smile back at him. But time was very short indeed, which is why our hero ordered his wolf to go on the attack. Immediately after that, the team gathered and was ready to make the next step to stop the goblin. At this point, the wolf really started growling very strongly, and our master instructed him to take the first blow and distract the chief. But for what? But he needs to be careful. At this point, our hero decided that he would be much better to fight with his usual weapons, which is why immediately, after a few seconds, he took out his favorite bow, and the wolf ran to attack. Immediately after that, the archer loaded his arrow and was ready to throw it at the enemy. But the only thing he needed now was to find his weak spot. That's why it came in handy. And the goblin kept cheering and laughing. He wanted absolutely everyone who got in his way to die. At this point, it was clear that the goblin chief had become much more aggressive, so he couldn't be mistaken. He kept growling and using his superpowers, so there was only one chance for him to finish what he had started. That's why the wolf immediately lunged at him at the most inopportune moment, something the goblin certainly could not have expected. At that moment, the guy looked closely and realized that he had to act right away, and then he immediately fired an arrow from his bow, which began to fly straight into its adversary. Parallel to them flew all the guardsmen and warriors that could be found in this canyon. At that moment, the goblin simply stopped and spread his arms out to his sides, immediately after which, a blue flash flew into the sky. The goblin then began to laugh and cheer very hard, but that was his mistake, for the blue glare was a shot that pierced his body completely, after which the goblin fell to the ground, and the arrow pierced his head. This was the end for this goblin, who lay already unconscious and began to glow bright blue. At that moment, absolutely all of them understood what was going on and what had happened. People could not believe that he was dead. There was really astonishment on their faces. Immediately afterwards, the system was activated, which reported that the chief of the goblins was dead, and the task had been successfully completed. All the people began to rejoice very much. They were mad with happiness that they could do it. The happiness of the quest was over. And also our wizard opened his system, which reported that the chief is defeated, which means they are awarded 6,740 experience points, as they have contributed the most to these tasks. In addition, his fame will increase by 124%, due to the fact that he fulfilled all the conditions of the quest. He was very happy, as his level and immediately afterwards in the addressee, which allowed him to unlock special skills, which are given after reaching level 30. He immediately received another alert from the system, which informed him that 2 new skills were now available for him to use in combat. Assigned skill to familiar and spatial exchange. He was very surprised and happy because he couldn't figure out what it was. At that moment, the leader of the warriors came up to him and informed him that he had defeated the goblin chief. That was why he decided to shake his hand and thanked him for his help by saying hello to the fight. He was very happy for his team, as they had not suffered any serious losses thanks to the masters, for which he was very grateful, which is why he now owed him. Well, the boy was also very happy. He also thanked them and said that they had managed and were able to defeat the goblins so quickly thanks to the bravery of his warriors. The chief turned around and told them to be more careful the moment they returned. That's why he wished everyone good luck and raised his hand up, saying that they had now completed their mission, so now they could go home. Everyone was thrilled and very happy about it, at which point the guy went up to his wolf and thanked him for getting it over with. When everything finally quieted down, the guy sat down on the ground and decided to consider his new skills. That's why the system immediately appeared in front of him, which reported that he had 1 skill related to potential. As he expected, it was assigned skill to familiarity. It allowed each time this skill was used to reduce the potential of the one being summoned by 20%. In principle, it's not a particularly good skill, but here he looked at it and decided that he would give it to his wolf, since it's really much needed to test his potential. But he only had 6 potentials, and you need about 100 to evolve. This made him a little frustrated and perplexed, so he tried to figure something out. At this point, he realized that he had to pass on his skills to increase his potential, and Paul had a very serious face. He needed to help his wolf evolve as quickly as possible, but it would affect his skills. That's why he sat pondering this question as the wolf just stood next to him. Immediately after that, the system unlocked his second skill, which was called Spatial Exchange. It allows you to summon or swap with your pet, in order for me to successfully activate. Users cannot take damage during its application. Thus, the higher the level, the lower the reload speed of the skill. It's a little disappointing that he didn't get an attacking or retarding skill, but it sure comes in handy in the bayou. He was very pleased, so it was a cool skill, though not exactly what he expected. At that moment, a girl ran up to him, who was really excited and shouted in his wake. He turned around and walked over to her. She just walked closer to him and started thanking him, saying it was all thanks to him. He laughed and started waving his hands around, saying that this girl was really good. But she just put her hands down and said she couldn't have done it without him. Immediately afterwards, the team gathered in a pile, and the wolf also approached, whom the boy also asked to thank for the work he had done. The girl was very surprised when she saw the wolf fighting. After all, he was very strong indeed. She went over and started stroking him, saying that she was very grateful to him for today. She began stroking him and just hugging him. At this point, 3 heroes waited for the guy and asked for forgiveness, but our master was perplexed. He didn't understand who they were and what they were here for. The most important of them suddenly came up to them and introduced himself, saying his name was Rukin. He didn't have time to introduce himself before, so he was too busy with Questa. So he held out his hand in greeting, after which our master also said hello to him and introduced himself. At this point, Rukin offered him to join them and do a couple of quests, after which the guy really thought a lot. But his interlocutor continued, saying that they know about the hidden quest, which is a continuation of the task to conquer the goblin camp. But our master was very surprised by such a hidden continuation. Is he really talking about the task of a priest? He had absolutely no plans to perform it now because of the difficulty. But now his level is much higher. He was very careful, for he had really thought about it before. But he looked again at his companions and realized that they were at least level 50, which is why he tried to guess why they really needed him. Then he looked in their direction again and said that their levels were too different. But his eyes lit up at the fact that there is a hidden part of the quest. He was as interested as possible, but still knew that something was wrong here. So you really need more information. It turns out that, yes, this is the quest to kill the goblin priest. He is in the tunnel behind the barracks. They found him. All that is left is to destroy him. Rukin went on to say that he is much weaker than the leader, but only worries that the enemy will be beyond their reach. At this point, he also informed us that our hero has a powerful artifact of summoning. If he joins them, they will surely succeed. But our boy was puzzled. He didn't understand a bit what exactly they meant by the word artifact. He smiled and realized that these guys had decided that he was using artifact, but they are really very expensive, so they wanted to kill him in order to make a fortune. He understood everything and started smiling very much, having figured out their plan. Immediately afterwards, he turned in their direction and said that he understood everything and would help them. After that, the team rejoiced that he was already in their trap. But the guy was also smiling, saying he could have fun with these dumbasses. At this point in the canyon, the sun had already begun to set over the horizon, and the smoke from previous battles continued to billow everywhere. The guy immediately turned to the girl in order to talk to her uninvolved. She immediately wondered why the guy was texting her when they were standing next to each other. But the guy wanted to clarify one thing, so he asked her to wait. He immediately turned to the 3 newcomers, saying that he really liked their proposal, but that he needed to ask his partner first. So he asked them to give him some time, to which, of course, they agreed. Immediately thereafter, he turned to Heron, asking if she had heard anything about Rukin's offer, and what she thought about it. She immediately scratched her head and thought about the answer. So the guy texted her, letting her know that they wanted their PK right away. The girl was surprised and asked, "What?" But Ian explained that it looked like they were planning to kill them the moment they did the High Priest quest. There was anger on his face, so he also added that they would rather try to kill him than both of them. The girl also tensed up and asked what they should do then. He ordered her to agree right now with him, which made Haran surprised. But after she looked at him, she immediately agreed. Sure. There's no reason to reject the offer since you will share the hidden quest with us. At this point, their enemies immediately smiled and were extremely happy about it, and the main one of them just realized that they were the real fools. Ian looked at the girl, who was a little scared, but trusted him. So she immediately asked him what their plan would be, but the master asked her not to worry, for he already had something in mind, namely, to capture all these fools all at once. But they just stood there and didn't suspect anything. They were just very happy that the foreman had paid attention to them, and now they would calmly cheat him and take all the money. At this moment, there was another man sitting on the mountain, who seemed to be enjoying his life very much, for he was very much enjoying even the fresh air of Kailan, because it is always so refreshing. He really couldn't believe it was virtual reality, and the scientists who did it all were really impressive. But he looked older than all those young guys. He kept looking off into the distance and added that his job was to convince the hiking club members to host their next month's meeting here in Kailan. He reached into his backpack and pulled out something that looked a lot like a roll and started to cheer like a child. After tasting it, he realized that it's not a hike without a delicious kimbap. Indeed, he really had already forgotten, so he immediately remembered why he was here and activated the call of the wolf, which 30 seconds later already appeared immediately beside him. He was very happy to see his master and began to lick him and bark. He always does this after he is called. He immediately pulled out a piece of big meat and offered it to him, saying it was just for him. The wolf then began to eat it near his master, while he enjoyed the view and the atmosphere, for it is indeed very relaxing. But he was a little wary, because there would have to be a game here right now anyway, wouldn't there? He immediately remembered that same conversation with a guy named Park Jin-sung, with whom they had argued earlier. He wondered, maybe he should ask him for his job? Because there is no way he's a summoner, right? At this point, things continued to get interesting down the canyon. Everything was glowing, the fight was in full swing. The new team of people were fighting the goblins, and the girl and the guy kept chatting, helping each other in the fight like a real team. After it was apparent that the completion of the quest was near, the chief of them became alert, and realized that the hidden boss, the goblin high priest, would appear soon, so shall he get ready for their real plan? It was that when these two worry about the goblin, they will pretend like they're engaged, and at the end they'll attack these two fools and get everything for themselves. In words, it was very simple. They continued to rejoice and already imagined their victory. The main one realized that he would soon be holding an artifact worth millions of gold in his hands. At this point, he was admonished not to laugh so hard. Couldn't he just do a poker face? The guy turned to the girl, saying that the monster was coming soon, so she asked what they should do now. The guy pointed to a place that actually looks like a prison, and if anyone tries to take a step in there, the boss will appear within 5 seconds. After that, the entrance will be closed by steel bars. They will follow the group, and after that he will give the girl the signal to jump back quickly. Okay? At this point, he also ordered his wolf lay to attack, whereupon he immediately pounced on a pack of goblins. The guy turned to the man in charge and said, would they mind if they went up to the entrance? To which he immediately agreed, though he was a little nervous. He turned around and started laughing, realizing that this idiot really doesn't have a clue. He won't be able to escape without his familiar, so everything is going as planned. Ian also wondered what this serpent was thinking right now, but he remained calm and was very happy. Suddenly, he looked again at the prison they were to run to. Then they were stopped by the high priest and 2 berserks who would appear over there. Now, let us all move in. The master smiled and agreed with him, but said to let Ray lead them then. At this point, the wolf kept walking and the countdown began. 5, 4. Jin-sung kept counting the numbers to himself. 3, 2. And when everything was already close to number 1, He immediately began to shout that right now we need to act, after which he immediately took the girl by the hand and began to run with her as hard as he could towards the exit, which she certainly could not have expected so quickly. Everything around them began to smoke, and white smoke covered their entire area, and that was it. Ray and his team were trapped, something he himself could not have expected. He immediately walked over to the metal beams and began to hold on to them, asking what happened. Why didn't they go with them? And what were they even doing? But the guy just kept smiling and didn't hold back his emotions. He was very happy and decided to clarify if he really didn't understand why he did it, or was he just pretending. So he decided to remind him once again that they tried to kill them and steal his summoner's artifact, which made him wary and really scared. He didn't understand what was going on, and how did he figure it out? So he looked again at the prisoners in the cage and said he had no more reason to play behind their plan. So he wished them luck and told those three to have a good time there. They were scared and trying to get out. Rai yelled that he was an idiot and didn't understand anything, because he wouldn't have a way out either. Because the conditions of the quest are that you cannot go back into the world until the boss monster is killed, or all party members are wiped out. Truthfully, we can take care of the high priest all by ourselves. He also added that after we slay the high priest and these bars lift, it will be your funeral. It won't take long. But with that threat, the guy just laughed and thanked them for the warning. Right after that, he ordered his wolf to attack his opponents, which he immediately did. A second later, Lei inflicted critical damage to Millen, and his health has decreased by 1,077, 32% of total health. They were surprised at what the wolf was doing here, and very scared. And at that moment, the system reported that Millen was infected and would bleed, taking 215 damage every 10 seconds. At this point, Rai was very aggressive. He didn't understand what this dog was doing here. After enough damage was given to the opponents, Jin Sung simply decided to summon his pet back so that no one would damage him as well. Rai was frightened after that and refused to believe what was happening right now behind his back, where the goblins were already standing in line and waiting for the fight to begin. He looked at them and fear completely pierced his eyes. He had absolutely never experienced such emotions before. At this point, the goblins began to approach him very quickly, along with their king. But this time, they were very aggressive and much larger in size than the ones before. Ray once again turned to the guy and was very angry. He once again decided to talk to him, asking, does he really think they can beat the boss? As soon as they got out, he would die. Jin Sung just threw up his hands and laughed a lot. He was very funny. So he sat down on the ground and said, let them win. He'd love to wait for him. At that moment, Ray tried again to open the cage, but he failed, which made him very angry. The monsters were already standing practically behind him. After that, the system also turned on and reported that the boss had appeared. The goblins were armed and looked much stronger and taller than the previous ones, and everything around the boss continued to smoke. Ray ordered his team to focus on the boss first, and then, after that, they would destroy the guy, to which the team agreed because they had no choice. And Millen was just barely even on his knees anymore. It was obvious that the wolf's blow had really hit him hard. Ray took his shield and once again reminded the guy that he was coming for him very soon. But he didn't care. He kept laughing. Also added, has any third-rate villain actually succeeded after saying that line? The girl also started to get a little worried and asked the guy if everything was really going to be okay. But he kept laughing, saying he could help if he was worried, which also made her very surprised. At this point, the fight began, and Rai was the first to rush into the fight, who wanted to get it over with as quickly as possible. Immediately, the goblins clashed with their axes and went on the attack. The girl also threw herself into the fight and began to defend herself against the goblin, who was noticeably taller and stronger than her. Suddenly, completely out of the blue, Rai is hit with a very hard axe, which he could not have expected. He got very angry and started screaming, immediately throwing himself back at the goblin as hard as he could, wounding him very badly indeed. But suddenly, a boss activated from behind and used his powers to heal the goblins and give them even more power. At this point, they realized that the first thing they needed to do was to kill the priest before he cast the spell. To which Millen said to leave that job to him, and immediately threw a spear at him with enormous force, which flew seemingly precisely on target. And lo and behold, it did fly near the goblin, but he was able to repel it. After that I realized it was an item from that bag. Barbarian's Blessing. The system also informed him that the Warrior Barbarian Blessing had now been activated, after which the goblins gained even more strength and power, because their minimum attack power had already been increased by 35%. At this point, Haran decided to switch on as well, and activated more of her superpowers, activating the Blessing of the Wind as well. She started to shine and was very happy, but Ray and her team absolutely could not believe it. Was she really that crazy? You buffed the monsters? The system also activated and reported that the activation of the wind powers was successful, and the Goblin Berserker's dexterity was increased by 42%. The girl turned to the guy and asked if that was enough, to which he simply asked if she could also fix them. After which, the girl immediately had a smile in her eyes and said, "Why not?" And she started doing it right away. At this point, the opposing team was already begging them not to do it. They just cried and after a few seconds just raised the white flag of despair, announcing that they were giving up and failing their quest. In the meantime, it was already dark enough outside, and the girl and her boyfriend decided to take a walk together through the night city along with her wolf. The guy looked at his spreadsheet and added that this bunch of losers had a lot of good stuff, so he called the girl to go with him to the auction house to sell the items he received. The girl was embarrassed and decided to thank the guy, because thanks to him, she passed this quest and received a great reward. And he, like a real gentleman, said that she really deserved it. But he also didn't think they could get the High Priest necklace, which is really very expensive. He looked at it again and said it was a little unfortunate that they would have to split the proceeds. But he also had quite a few other items, so that was okay. He remembered how the girl had supported him and was a little embarrassed, because he didn't even expect her to like it that much. But it seemed to be worth it. He stroked her feet and told her they had to hurry. After which the girl proceeded to ride the wolf again, and the guy clarified that they were now straining to get to the auction house. And so, they are already near him, after which the guy immediately gave the buyer his gold, which they honestly earned. He looked into the system and was very happy, because indeed, they were all sold at a high price, and the guys earned 660,000 gold at once for it. All that money had already been earned clean, after deducting the auction house commission. Now that he thinks about it, he picked up a rock and became very curious as to what it was. Why did a group of opponents drop them? He wanted to figure it out, because it was really warm. Did it seem designed to be used as a hot compress in the winter? A description of the items is useless here. He just kept tossing it around and realized he really didn't want to throw it away. At this point, the girl turned to him, saying she had finally finished buying the ingredients and smiling sweetly. So the guy called her out and said that in that case they should go and complete the quest. It was still dark outside, and the lights were on in the houses. The team approached their NPC comrade, who was already waiting for them, and was very happy to see them. Immediately thereafter, he completed their quest, and for making the greatest contribution to it, the team received an SS grade. The system also rewarded them with 56,700 gold, and gave them another 1,743,200 experience points. Thanks to this, the guy's level rose from level 31 to 34 at once. He was really excited because it's a really great experience, and they also gave a lot of gold, which is really very cool. The girl also turned to him and told him that she had also reached level 46, for which he also congratulated her. At this point, Jin Sung approached the NPC and informed him that, by the way, Commander, he met the high priest goblin behind the barracks and showed him his necklace. He was immediately surprised and asked, "Did they really defeat the goblin priest?" This is really unbelievable. So the system activated again and informed them that they had completed another quest and gained another 674,000 experience points. After which the guy's level also increased. He was very happy about this outcome. But the NPC was very surprised by this, because the vigilante team had been tracking him for a month. How did they find him? But the guy just replied that he was really lucky. But he was stopped and told that it couldn't be simple luck, which really made him tense up a bit. But the NPC handed him a Savoy and told him that the guy was really entitled to it. After he took it, his whole face began to shine. He couldn't believe it. He turned it around even more, and everything around him turned red. And the guy himself seemed to start getting unimaginable power that absolutely no one had ever had before. This is something that will completely overturn your idea of what a real taming master should be. Our story doesn't end there. It just continues. So be sure to subscribe and like the channel so you don't miss out. And it would be fun to see your impressions in the comments.